Charles here again from Robot Fitness. Today we're going to talk a little bit about power, what it means on a rowing machine, how you get it, and how to get faster. The biggest part that people seem to get confused about when it comes to rowing and power is the damper. The damper is the slider on a Concept 2. That's our standard machine. It's the standard machine for most crews around the world. Most people, when they go for power, are going to automatically send it all the way to the top. They figure that's where you're going to get all your power. Power isn't necessarily found just by moving the damper up. The damper controls how fast the flywheel slows down, and so if you can't push enough power into that flywheel each time because it's too heavy, then you're not going to be able to get power even though you've moved it up to a 10. So for some people, at max effort, they are best on a 7 or an 8 or a 6. Now, to complicate matters, that changes based on how well maintained the machine is. The better the maintenance, the more accurate those numbers are going to be from machine to machine. The poor maintenance at a lot of gyms ends up with a lot of dust and dirt and grime, causing those numbers to be a little less accurate and the top end to be a little lower, because it's keeping more air in that flywheel. Moving aside the technical discussion, to get power, most people after that want to just move faster back and forth. And while this is a piece of power, this isn't the whole story, and it's certainly not the biggest part of the story. When it comes to getting power out of the machine, once you've got everything set up right, which you can check out on our orientation video, the biggest part of getting power is getting through the drive with force. Now, that seems like a silly thing to say, but a lot of people struggle with that when it comes to wanting to put power down. They just want to move more times per minute back and forth, higher stroke rate. For peak power, for a single pull, who knows what you might find. For something like 100 meters, you're going to row differently than you are for a minute. You're going to row differently for 500 meters or for 2,000 meters. The power, you have to be able to manage each piece of it. The power you get from your legs, the power you get from the body swing and the arms, the end of the stroke, you need to be able to weave those together to be able to generate a predictable amount of power each time and recover easily. So to get power, to get faster, you can push harder, you hear the flywheel gets louder, and even though I'm at a relatively low stroke rate, I can go decently fast without really working all that hard. To go at max effort at a low stroke rate, where you put all your power into each stroke, everything you got, leaning into it, lots of power at the front end, lots of power out of your legs, that's going to get you much more power into the flywheel every time. Now, you can't put that much power into each stroke and go at a high stroke rate. That's where the rub comes from. You have to find the balance for you, for the distance, of power through the stroke, recovery time, and stroke rate. If you push hard and you're having to sling yourself back forward to get there, you're not going to be able to maintain that long. You're going to run out of cardio very quickly. At a lower stroke rate with more resistance, you're going to be taxing your muscles more rather than your cardio system. So you have to work with it a little bit, play around with it, find what works well for you. Practice different distances at different damper settings. Practice at different stroke rates. One of the things that we've worked on with many clients is practicing varying stroke rates within a piece as parts of the stroke get weak. What I mean by that is, if you're putting a lot of power into the stroke from your legs, start really standing up off the machine, your legs start to get tired halfway through the piece, you can't continue that. You'll handle down and just be done. So instead, if you push if you push a little less with your legs, because they're hurting, and then you pull harder with your arms for a little bit, you can kind of tilt that power more towards your upper body for a few strokes. Let your muscles recover a little bit, and then go back more into a normal stroke, or go back heavier on legs if that's where you're stronger. When it comes to pushing through the power, the main place that you're going to start the power is in your legs, and that's going to start with pushing through your heels and pushing your knees down to force you to use your quads. Big muscles, big power. Pushing here, and then overlapping that strongly with your core and your arms. You're just carrying as much of that power to the finish. It all starts in the legs. So when you push, most of your stroke is your legs. So you want to get as much out of it as you can. Now I'm going to grab the camera, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the numbers up here as well. So up here is your stroke rate. That's your split. Obviously that's your total distance, which I'm rowing a lot right now. Depending on the screen you're on, you may see some different things. This is the standard one for this button. If you want to see a force graph, it's the second button. And the force graph will show you a lot of interesting stuff to show you where you're getting your power from. I'm going to set the camera down for a second and take a quick stroke and then show you what it looks like. So a couple of strokes later, and that's a pretty good looking force graph. You can see that in the front part of the stroke, lots of power from the legs, and then there's a little bit of a dip as we're coming down into the arms and body, and then finishing. So a bad stroke, you'll be able to see the three parts of the stroke. You'll see not as much power, not as high of a peak, or you'll get a very sharp peak. Those are all different ways that you can apply the power inefficiently. And efficiency is the name of the game here. So let me show you what a couple of these different graphs look like. So this is a low power graph. Obviously not getting a lot of peak here, and just carrying kind of weak energy through the end of the stroke. Here we've got max power from the legs and nothing happening after. So you get a really sharp peak from pushing really hard with the legs, and then nothing to follow it up. This usually happens when you're doing what we call shooting the tail. That's when your butt goes a little faster than the rest of your body, and you're not carrying that power into the handle the way that you want to. Last but not least, this is one where it's weak to begin with, but also you can see the three parts of the stroke: legs, body, arms. A little dip in between each one. That's because I was slowing down and really separating the pieces of the stroke. When you're rowing for power, you want those connections to be as smooth as possible. In the original graph, you saw that those were, there were very little variation in the slope of the graph. So you were getting a very nice clean transition from each stage. So that's the basics of power. You want to think about pushing through your legs. You want to think about carrying that power to the finish. Make sure that you practice at different damper settings to kind of find what works for your strength, your cardio fitness. Same with the stroke rates. And that'll help you get the most out of every session you do.